Okay, so what you have is about a 2-week siege of the Alamo. Let me see here. I'll go to this map of the Texas Revolution. Um, and during that time period, on Washington on the Brazos, the consultation that the Texas government actually does meet, and on March 2nd, 1836, declares that Texas is independent from Mexico. And so the Alamo defenders never know that. They never get the word that Texas has finally declared its independence. The Mexican Texas has declared its independence from the nation of Mexico. The battle occurs on March 6th, 1836. It's a absolutely horrific event. As we know, all of the defenders of the Alamo were killed either on the day of the battle or the next day. Upwards to 500 Mexican soldiers were killed as well. Probably the cream of the crop of the Mexican army, because these were the folks that were actually in there doing the fighting. And one of the things I want you to notice about the Pannier Diary that you're reading about in Crisp is the Mexican army is furious with Santa Anna because the battle didn't have to go the way it went. Santa Anna could have easily waited for his artillery to come up. His artillery was in the rear of his army, and it took a while to get their artillery to San Antonio. And he just could have bombed the Alamo into submission. But as I said on Monday, Santa Anna didn't really want to capture any of the defenders of the Alamo. He wanted to kill them all. He had his Justice Minister Tornell issue the Tornell Decree that said that anybody that was opposing Santa Anna's army, anybody that was in armed rebellion against the Mexican government. And remember, Santa Anna is the president of Mexico, right? So he's not invading a foreign country. He's the Mexican president going into Mexican soil. Let's remember that. So Santa Anna, again, given kind of the context of what had happened with Arredondo, 20 years before, Santa Anna wants to kill all the defenders of the Alamo, and he's trying to send a message, right? He's trying to terrorize Texas. Remember, at this point, Texas is about 36,000 folks, and of these, probably 30,000 are Anglo, 4,000 are slaves, and only a couple thousand are Tejano. So one of the things to remember about the period of the Texas Revolution is how Tejanos are outnumbered, hugely outnumbered, and by Anglos. Texas, especially East Texas, has in effect become Americanized. And let me just jump back to what I talked about earlier in the course. The chickens are coming home to roost, the inability of Spain to populate Texas. Now the chickens are coming home to roost in the 1830s, when Texas is far more Anglo than it is really Tejano or Mexican. So anyway, to go back to the Mexican army, some of the best soldiers of the Mexican army are killed at the Alamo. You have to give the defenders of the Alamo credit. They fought with great tenacity. It was quite a savage event. I think the savagery and the violence of the Alamos kind of has gotten lost in a way because it's so familiar to us. But it was a pretty horrific couple of hours as the Mexican army and the Anglo-American and Tejano defenders fought for the Alamo. And ultimately, of course, the Alamo was captured by the Mexican army. And then some issues arise. And you're reading about this in Crisp. The big controversial question is, today anyway, is did Davy Crockett die the day of the Alamo? And it's kind of very interesting to me that so many people care that he died the day of the Alamo, because there's no doubt that Davy Crockett died horribly in San Antonio. He either died the day of the Alamo or he was captured with some of his men and executed horribly the next day. So Davy Crockett certainly didn't survive the Alamo. But for a lot of folks, for a lot of Texans today, it's very important to them that Davy Crockett actually died the day of the Alamo. That in some ways it was a suicide. What the Alamo did is, if you know Jewish history, Masada was a fortress that was on a kind of a mountaintop in modern day Israel. And it was under siege by the Roman army, and ultimately all the defenders of Masada killed themselves rather than submit to the Roman army, because the Roman army was about to storm their defenses. So I guess there's something more powerful about everybody being killed the same day than this kind of loose end over Davy Crockett surrendering and being captured the next day. And one of the problems is, and one of the issues is, if Davy Crockett survived the battle and surrendered with a couple of men, it leads to another question. It begs the question, what was Davy Crockett doing the day of the Alamo? Why was it that he survived the Mexican attack? So it brings up some interesting questions about Crockett's action. And the whole argument, and what Crisp is talking about, he's talking about something specific, right? The issue of Davy Crockett. Did he die the day of the Alamo? He's talking about the controversy over the De La Pannier Diary, and the De La Pannier Diary it's what it is really, it's an expose that this guy De La Pannier wrote, because the Mexican people did not know how Santa Anna had screwed up in Texas, that Santa Anna had basically fumbled Texas away. Communication were terrible at that point, and it was very unclear ultimately why the Mexicans lost. And De La Peña, who was an officer in the Mexican army, he goes back and he wants to write an expose pointing the finger at Santa Anna. And one of the things that he talks about in this expose is, and it's not a big deal for him, Peña doesn't care about Davy Crockett. He doesn't know Davy Crockett has been this iconic figure in U.S. history or in Texas history. How would he know that in 1836? So it's not like Peña's trying to undermine the Davy Crockett legend or legacy, because he has absolutely no idea that there's going to be a Davy Crockett legend or legacy. Peña's just reporting what he sees. And the other thing is that one of the significant things about his account of what happens with Davy Crockett is that he reports that the Mexican army is disgusted by Santa Anna's order to execute Davy Crockett, that they're demoralized. And if you think about the word demoralize, think about the word moral within that. Demoralize means you lose your morale, you become less attached to the cause. And what it means is they'd lost their morality, because they felt like what Santa Anna did in executing Crockett, according to Peña, we'll never know with 100% certainty, although I have to say I do think that's what happened. I do think Crockett surrendered and was executed the next day. I think there's a lot of evidence that points in that direction, but we'll never know with 100% certainty. The Mexican army was disgusted by what Santa Anna did. And what's significant about this is this humanizes the Mexican army. When I was a kid growing up, the Mexican army was just seen as this undifferentiated mass of, and I apologize, and I'm not, what I'm about to say, it may sound insensitive, but I'm trying to talk about the image of the Mexican army, I believe, in the minds of many Texans and many Americans. And you might think of it as analogous to orcs in Lord of the Rings, or if you watch those movies, or The Hobbit. Actually, you know what? There were so many orcs killed in those movies, I started feeling sorry for them. I just got tired of it. But so I'm not trying to denigrate the Mexican soldiers. What I'm trying to say is that Peña, he saves them from denigration by talking about their humanity. that they were demoralized, that they were upset, that they were angry at Santa Anna for ordering the execution of Davy Crockett and later ordering the massacre of the soldiers at Goliad. It gives what the Pannier Diary does is gives Mexican soldiers back their humanity when they're often seen as just this undifferentiated mass of evil. And it separates the common Mexican soldier who was horrified by what Santa Anna did. It separates them from the Mexican leadership, and in particular, it separates them from Santa Anna. The last thing I'll say is the other thing about Mexican soldiers is they're furious at Santa Anna for not waiting for the artillery to come up. That the artillery had taken so long to get to San Antonio. They knew that if Santa Anna had just waited just a couple of days, that the Battle of the Alamo, it might have ended up with all the Texans dying, but far fewer Mexican soldiers would have died. And they're furious with Santa Anna for his lack of generalship, for the decisions that he makes. So again, what's interesting about the Pannier Diary, and I don't think really this is what he's trying to do, what he's really trying to do is just talk about how dumb and corrupt and evil Santa Anna is. But just in his discussion, I think we get a new view of the Mexican army, and you start seeing Mexican soldiers as human beings with feelings and opinions, which is not often what you get when you hear the story of the Alamo.